Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali. Hello everyone, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you are listening to this. And thank you very much for taking the time to connect with me, and it's great to be able to connect with you. I'd like to thank MILE also for the opportunity to do this. So yeah, we're connected, and connection really is what my talk is all about. Connection between individuals, connection across organizations, connection beyond organizations, maybe via social media or other tools or other networks. What I'm going to try to argue is that the power of connection is critical in today's age. The skill set of being a great connector is a must-have, be that person to person, employee to purpose, employee to idea, customer or stakeholder to brand. The ability to create connections that last and grow is critical to sustainable advantage. And I'm also going to argue that connection is an ancient skill set, one that has many similarities regardless of whether it's face-to-face, on a social media platform, or in a less personal situation. And that doing so, as I say, can create sustainable advantage. There's a story about Warren Buffett, known as the Sage of Omaha, the great investor of our times, and he was asked once what were the criteria that he used to ascertain whether or not to invest in a company. And basically he said it's simple, there is only one. They have to be able to create sustainable competitive advantage. And I'm going to argue that if we can really leverage relationships, we can do just that. So let's have a little brief look at the world that we live in now. It's a VUCA world. For those of you who haven't heard of a VUCA world, it was a term or an acronym coined by the US military somewhere around the time of the Cold War to try to describe the changing world that we were living in and how it was moving. And it's a world I'm sure you'll recognize: volatile, fast-moving, confusing, uncertain, complex, difficult to understand, ambiguous. Nothing seems quite the same. Certainly if you live in the UK, as I do, you can see that demonstrated every night on the 6 o'clock news, and I would give a fair bet that will be the case for whichever country that you're attending this webinar from as well. So we live in a fast-paced world of complex change, and all the experts tell us we can't stop it, it's only going to get faster. Another way of looking at the world, this blurred world that we live in, is this. IBM last year recorded an article I read that there are some 6 billion smartphones and tablets active across the world, and that the top 3 social media platforms alone account for 2.5 billion account holders. So we genuinely, or most of us, genuinely are hyper-connected, mobile, and social. We also have changing demographics. In America, 48% of the US labor force by 2020 will come from the generation known as millennials. Now, I don't come from the generation known as millennials. I'm maybe a generation or so before that. But I can recognize the huge differences in expectations and rules of engagement that brings. The people who will be our customers, our colleagues, and our members of staff in the future are already and will continue to be more assertive, more demanding, much less likely to defer to authority, and much more capable of choice. Many years ago I used to be a retailer, and if we had something that was a big seller and we ran out, we used to never worry about it because we'd get a delivery in a day or two and they would come back in and buy it. These days, I imagine they either go to the next shop or more likely get onto their smartphone in your shop and order exactly what they want within seconds. So the world really has changed. We have easy access to a world of choice. Why is that important? Because the Journal of Marketing suggests that a 1% change in customer satisfaction drives market value of over 4.6%. So getting a handle on this world really makes money. Come back to that in 1 second, sorry. So we need to keep customers engaged in this world of low attention spans. We also need to keep staff engaged. Gallup, as many of you probably know, do research on engagement. And one of their findings is that increased engagement can lead up to 200% difference in higher performance. So we need to engage customers, we need to engage staff, and we need to do so in this blurry VUCA world that we live in. So, do we have any constants? Yes, we do. Fortunately, there is some consistency across all the chaos of this world. And the consistency, I think, is this, because whether we're customers, whether we're staff, whether we're colleagues, any kind of stakeholder, we're all human beings. There are some fundamental truths that apply to us all. Going back to the quote, Brené Brown is an author, excellent author and commentator on social connection. And she says this: we're profoundly social creatures. As psychologists from Maslow to Baumeister have repeatedly stressed, the truth of the matter is that a sense of social connection is one of our fundamental human needs, even in this world. And indeed, in this world, another quote in a second from Brian Solis, digital guru, futurist, technology expert, talking about the network world that we live in. And he says, at the heart of this network are the connections and relationships that unfold over time. Like in real-world relationships, the more we invest in terms of time, openness, value, listening, engagement, the more likely it is that relationships will thrive. So we need to make sense of the world, and we can make sense of the world. If we can tame the tiger that is VUCA, if we can't tame the tiger that's VUCA, because that's coming at us regardless, can we perhaps reframe it in a positive way based on some of those timeless principles of social connection? Well, I believe the answer is yes. Some of these reframe principles, reframe positively, might be that we recognize that people want to be valued for who we are, as opposed to, for example, as a unit of production. We want to have practice with us some of those universal truths that I've been touching on and we'll go into a little bit more detail about. The universal behaviors that create trust and respect. We can use those behaviors to create collaborative communities, genuinely collaborative communities that may be framed on some belief in a common purpose. I'll come back to community later. And they're founded on making and multiplying authentic connections in a wide variety of directions. Using these reframe principles, we can create a wellspring of what a friend of mine, fun enough, a social media friend of mine who I've never actually met and may never meet, but nonetheless I would trust with nearly anything. He's a gentleman called Rob Peters, and he runs an organization called the Standard of Trust Group. And he's coined a concept called relationship capital. And that's what this all adds up to, in a sense. If we can create a wellspring of relationship capital, the spring can become a river, the river can become an ocean, and we can really see the potential for sustainable advantage. My slides seem to have gone very fast all of a sudden. Sorry, sustainable advantage. What is it? Well, it's many things, but here are some of the characteristics. I'm sorry, my computer's jumping about all over the place. Sustainable advantage is unique, so it's difficult to replicate. People can't just bottle it and sell it under another brand or make it faster and cheaper in some other part of the world. It's perhaps based on organic growth, and what I mean by organic growth in this sense is growth that is not necessarily driven always top-down, that people across the enterprise are capable of acting spontaneously in the direction of what the enterprise needs, and that makes it hard to replicate as well. In other words, it has a great operating system. And there was a quote I loved when I read it recently. I was reading an interview between a leadership expert called Roger Dean Duncan and a lady called Barbara Kimmel, who is Executive Director of Trust Across America, and whose business and interest is trust. And the quote was this: "Trust is the operating system of every organization and every relationship." And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that's so true, because in the end, organizations are only collections of people, and maybe in the end, relationships are all we have to fall back on. So if we think about trust as a place at the heart of our operating system, and genuinely practice the mechanisms that create and sustain trust, people gradually come on board. They begin to relate to, and over time, as actions are matched with, as words, are matched with actions, a genuine purpose or new ideas that are truly understood as being in line with that purpose. They then have the potential to develop a great culture, because there's many elements to culture, but people and shared beliefs are significant aspects of that. Organizations that have a great culture internally tend often to have a great culture externally, because people behave in ways with each other, get used to behaving in that way, and apply those behaviors to the rest of the community. So in a simplistic way, happy, satisfied people tend to deal with customers in a happy, satisfied way, and in doing so breed the same loyalty from one-to-one relationships as they do in brand relationships. So I do believe it's possible to talk about trust as the operating system which these ideas are founded upon. So let's take a look about trust for a few minutes. Look at the cost of trusts and maybe the benefits as well. IHG is Intercontinental Hotels Group, and they did some research which indicated that operating profits differed between hotels with highly engaged staff and those without highly engaged staff by up to 7%. A 5% rise in engagement, they said, equates to 70 cents rise in return per available room per night. What that means is a 200-bed hotel, average hotel perhaps, could make up to $50,000 per annum by changing only the level of staff engagement and nothing else. Gallup does all sorts of research every year on engagement and produces many statistics. The one that stuck out for me was that in the US alone, and this was written in 2013, they estimate the cost of disengagement to be somewhere between $450 and $550 billion annually. The Edelman Trust Barometer surveys trust across the world in all sorts of ways annually. And in the 2013 survey, just 18% of people surveyed said they trusted business leaders. Fully engaged customers, customers who do trust, according to Gallup Business Journal, deliver 23% increased share of wallet, profitability, and revenue growth. So low trust really does cost big time. Benefits of trust. Here's some facts and figures on those. Forbes GMI ratings survey 8,000 companies annually, and they say the cost of capital in the most trusting companies is inevitably lower. The Global Alliance for Banking on Values research says 7% higher return on equity for values-based banks, 51% higher return on assets for sustainable banks. So good stuff delivered well can make money. Fortune, in their piece on the 100 best companies, which is itself based on the Great Place to Work survey, suggests that the best organizations achieve up to 50% less turnover, that's less hires, less interviews, more people doing the right things, and up to, probably as a result, up to 2 times the performance of the marketplace in general. So to me, and I hope to you, focusing on trust is a no-brainer. It's not just the right thing to do, but it's the profitable thing to do. So let's look at what it takes to deliver on that, to deliver on trust. I think the answer is to understand how relationships work and to work hard on relationships. Very easy to talk about relationships and trust and nice words like those, but it's hard to do, so it needs a lot of practice. Trust in particular takes a long time to bring about and nanoseconds to squander. So I thought it might be worth just sharing with you a model that means a lot to me about how relationships work, and then see if we can apply it to the argument that I've made already. Some of you may know the model. It's called the Johari Window, and it's been around for quite a long time in the world of training and development. And here's the sort of basic frame of the window. Two parties, self and others. And in the top left of the window we have the open area, which is known by me and known also by others, i.e. in this case you. So you don't know a lot about me other than anybody who's done any research, but you would do at least know what Ali shared or what you've read in preparation to coming for this seminar. There's quite a lot of stuff, however, about me that I haven't told you about, and we haven't got time in 40 minutes for me to go into. And under my surface are all sorts of values, feelings, attitudes to life and to other people that if we got to know each other better would slowly become apparent. That's the bottom left box. The top right box, the blind area, is stuff about me that you know, individually at least, if not collectively, because we're not communicating in that sense yet. You know, but I don't. And that's probably something like what impression I'm making as I cover this this webinar. You're probably open to my verbal tics even better than I am. And then there's something called the unknown area, which is unknown by self and unknown by others. So that's the basic frame. How do relationships work in this frame? Right, well, relationships work by 2 parties exchanging. Party 1, if we go to the top right frame, go to the bottom left frame, let's go there first, start to engage in self-disclosure. Tell stories, say a little bit about what's really going on for them, open up a little. And in doing so, they create an impression on other people that very frequently brings the same thing back. You know, 2 people start off as polite, on their guard, what's this person going to be like, and as they open up, they gradually start to realize that they have much more in common. So self-disclosure increases the open area quite significantly. So does feedback, because if I manage to persuade you to tell me what you think, I might not like it, or I might think it was great, but at least I would know more about the impact I'm making about myself. And so in both those spaces, I'm increasing my own self-awareness, and of course we're doing this always in conjunction with other people. So relationships work by one person, typically, taking the lead and telling stories, being more self-disclosive, and at the same time also seeking to find out what other people think and what other people think of them. And my experience, and what the commentators all say, is the more that you do that, the more you get back. The more you give, the more you gain. If we go one stage further and look now at the bottom box, that unknown area, when 2 people are really operating together effectively, they're undergoing a process, and it is a trust-based process, I would argue, of shared discovery. If we could do everything ourselves, we wouldn't need teams. Therefore, we do need teams, and we have to work on a process called conflict. Conflict, in the way I mean it, is just a difference of opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean a massive fight. But the idea that we all think the same would lead to sort of a very black and white sort of a world. To get effective conflict, the conversation really needs to be about shared discovery, where others' observations and your own observations come together to take you to a point that neither of you might have reached separately and individually. So in a sense, the world grows as we get to know each other, as we build relationships with each other, as we engage in the process of trust. And if you understand that and practice it, then you can be the person who takes the lead in relationships on the basis that if you do so genuinely, authentically, and with a real interest in other people, they will nearly always, over time, start to reciprocate. And if you do so consistently, you will widen and deepen your range of relationships. So there's no rocket science to this, there's no algorithms to this. This is simply about taking a stance about how to build effective relationships and work over them more generally. And in the process of doing so, I think we get here. Win-win opportunities in the sense of having a constructive, collaborative conversation that ends in maybe a little bit wider in that bottom right box from the previous slide. I believe win-win-win benefits. Why do they do that? Because trust is a replicable activity. So as I realize that by opening up to other people, I get more from them and our relationship improves, I make the connection that if I've done that with person A, maybe if I did it with person B, although the conversation itself will be different, the impact might be the same. And so we move from having people who are friendly with each other, who work well together, to begin to have the potential for cultures that are founded on shared values and shared purpose and work well together, hence the win-win-win side of things. What I would offer you perhaps by way of some ground rules, at least some rules of the road in terms of making all this work, are the following. Give more than you ask. It really is true. My brother used to work for an organization whose motto was givers gain. And in my belief, that really is true. The more you give, the more you get back, be that feedback, time, attention, noticing, those kinds of things. All of us wear a mask, a different mask. If not take the mask off, then at least start to loosen it a little and be recognized for who you are, who the person, not who the manager, who the leader, who the IT guy, who the director. Don't take the mask off necessarily with a dramatic gesture, but check it out. Slide it off a little bit at a time. And once it feels that the mask is off, just see how that feels and then reevaluate the people that you've been working with over that period. So that would be the second positive I'd offer you. And the third is reframe situations in the positive. We all want to work in a positive world where we can make things happen, and we all tend to get what we believe in. So if I enter a race thinking I'm going to be third or fourth, there is no way that I'll be first or second. Research on teams suggests that the more conversations are framed in the positive, the more likely they are to be effective teams. So find a way, in the same way as I tried to reframe the VUCA world earlier on, to reframe situations in the positive to get the most out of them. You can't possibly find out about other people without asking questions. And in many ways, the beauty of the skills that I'm talking about is that we've known about them since we were able to give ourselves voice. But to ask really good questions, questions to really understand and probe and follow up, it's difficult and does need practice. And if you're going to ask questions, you need to listen deeply. Not listen for the point in the conversation where you can sound off about your own particular viewpoint, but to really understand what somebody means. Somebody once said to me, there's nothing more more enjoyable than having a good listening to. And if we could only improve the quality of listening in our homes and our teams and our organizations, we would make a significant difference. I've referred to feedback already, and again there are skills to it that are subjects of other areas of development. But give feedback and ask for feedback. And in my experience, in many organizations, feedback is in short supply, and it's often not very well handled. And if nothing else, even if the feedback is negative, as long as you know what it is, you have a choice. You can do something about it, or you can continue the same way. It's also true that the more feedback you give, the more you will get back, because it works in exactly the same way as the reciprocal arrangements that I was referring to earlier. What do colleagues want from you? And I'm saying colleagues in a wide sense. It could mean the person sitting at the next desk. It could mean the person sitting in the overseas office. It could mean the person that you're facing, I guess, in your workplace as a customer or a partner or a supplier. Well, I think they want the same thing that you want, or what I assume you want, because I know I do. They want to be cared about as people. They want to have some sense of connection between what they do and what it achieves. I genuinely believe, and I think to make this all work, you also have to genuinely believe that people come to work, by and large, to do the best job they can. And in the VUCA world that we have, it's sometimes difficult to achieve that. But that doesn't mean the intention wasn't right. And the more you can connect that and believe in them towards a purpose, the more you will reap. They need permission to be themselves, to bring their own skills to the party, not to keep them behind the mask. But they also need and will benefit from being held accountable for the decisions that they make. And for you being accountable for yours as well. Too often in organizations that I work with and consult to, or people that I coach, they're either feeling the victim of being blamed, or they are blaming somebody else for the situation they find themselves in. And so instead of an atmosphere of blame, there's a concept a friend of mine called Neil Wooding calls intelligent failure. Focus on a culture of learning instead. Think about what can we learn from that situation rather than use it to judge or blame. And in doing all those things, hopefully you will find that you achieve more meaningful relationships, because fundamentally, although we're different people, thankfully, and we look different and we have different customs and traditions depending on where we come from, we all look for meaningful relationships, and when we get meaningful relationships, we really value them. An example of what I'm talking about, this is the Pope, but my example to illustrate the story is from that retailer I worked for many years ago. I was lucky enough to work for an organization that had an extraordinary boss. He was actually over here what we call a peer of the realm, so he was a lord as a result of his activities. And he was the boss of the organization, and he used to come and visit the stores, and I was a fairly lowly assistant manager. And he would come to the store, and he would start off by, getting the management team together and going over the figures and asking some probing questions and so on. And then at a certain point, normally after he'd given us a fairly hard time, he would say, right, I want to go and visit the store now. And he would walk all around the store. And everywhere he went in the store, he would make a point of picking out 1, 2, sometimes 3 people, mostly individually, but sometimes in groups. And he would have maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute and a half of conversation with these people. And in that conversation, what struck me was the attention that he gave to these people. Now, after he'd been around the store for an hour and a half, he would go back up, and normally he would kick the manager out of his office, and he would make the kind of phone calls that he needed to make. So prime ministers, fellow captains of industry, etc. He was an important guy, had important things to do. And to him, the activities that had been engaged in on the sales floor with these people were pretty mundane in one sense, but he realized that for them, those activities were extraordinary. It's a concept called the extraordinization of the mundane. And by giving people proper attention, you can make the mundane extraordinary, as indeed can I. It's a question of remembering how to do it. The C-suite. I'm kind of using C in a slightly different context to the way that it normally is used. I mean the connection suite. And I'm thinking here of advice to people who are leaders or senior people in organizations, because in a way this still does work from the top. If you're getting the behavior that we've been talking about, or I've been talking about, from the top, you're much more likely to pass it on throughout the organization. And what do people want from the connections at the top? They want consistency, people who can be relied on to operate in a consistent way regardless of circumstances. They want congruence. That means, to me at least, people who match their words with their deeds. I've been into many companies where the first thing you see in the reception area is the company values, and by the third person you meet, you realize they're only a framed picture on the wall. Congruence is about living them out in practice. They want collaborative challenge, so they absolutely do, I think, want to be challenged, but they also want to have the benefits and the buzz and the motivation of working constructively with other people. So this is not a soft world I'm talking about. It's a world that's based on people believing that you can do better. And they also want compassion, because at the end of the day, as I say, we're all human beings. And we need to be understood. The fact that we're human beings mean that we get it wrong. When I became a manager zillions of years ago, I used to think that I couldn't possibly show weakness because either I was dealing with a competitor or I was dealing with somebody who needed to believe that I knew exactly what I was doing. When actually, at 25, 90% of the time I really wasn't sure about what I was doing, and 50% of the time I had no idea what I was doing. But actually the power of vulnerability, another thing Brené Brown writes about beautifully, is incredibly important, because if we can see that we're being led and managed by human beings, authoritative human beings, yes, but humble human beings who know perhaps that they don't know everything, and how can we know everything in this VUCA world, then they relate better to each other. And people who create meaning, and I suppose I mean by that giving people attention, helping them to work out how what they do relates to the purpose of the organization, making conversations, or at least a larger percentage of conversations, transformational conversations, not the transactional ones that we usually have. Practice those consistently, and I genuinely believe you will improve the power of connection. If you can get all that moving internally, you will develop advocates who exhibit the same priorities and the same practices and the same behaviors with all the communities that they operate in. So it's perhaps worth us just taking a minute or so to think about community. And in my view, the notion of community that I grew up with, which was the place that I lived, which happens to be a relatively small city in Scotland, and even smaller village outside that city, has changed completely. While that part of community still exists, we have over time, I think, moved from a community of place to communities of purpose, people who, particularly on social media, graduate towards things that they like to do or value being done. And through the mechanism of the many tools available to us at our fingertips, can can connect with people who have similar interests, similar mindsets, similar values. I've derived enormous satisfaction over the last 3 or 4 years from being petrified of social media, to having friends, and I really mean friends, all over the world who I've met as a result of gradually pursuing my interests and perhaps, you know, showing a bit more of myself to them, you know, over time. So seek to build communities of purpose. Prioritize mindset over toolset. It's great we've got so many fantastic tools in the world, and they do enable remarkable communication. However, the most effective leaders realize that they are just tools, like Brian Solis, I think, was saying, and they focus on creating the mindset to use the tools wisely, widely, and in the sense of a common purpose. And in doing so, hopefully, the same values that were in the C-suite on the previous slide will create brand advocates internally and increasingly externally. Brand advocates who deal in what my friend calls relationship capital. And that relationship capital is what creates the opportunity for sustainable advantage. There's a guy called Julian Stodd who writes extensively on areas of social leadership and impact on the community. And this is a model of his that I've put the reference in the bottom of the slide. It's not my work, but I highly commend it to you. And this is his net model of social leadership, the net coming from the 3 words at the heart of the circle. But if you look round the circle, and there's no time to go into it in detail now, and it's not my model, as I say, you will see that nearly all of those segments on the model are based on the behaviors that I've been talking about in this show. Julian writes extensively, blogs regularly, and I highly recommend his thinking and his work to you. I'd like to finish with 2 quotes, if I may, that hopefully encapsulate what I've tried to put across in this webinar. First of all, another Brene Brown quote about connection. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. And I'm suggesting that we need to work on this energy, and this energy, if worked on, can grow exponentially. And then finally, from a guy called Mark Schaeffer. Mark Schaeffer is the author of a book called Return on Influence, which is not an updated version of, but a 20 years later version of the same thing that Dr. Robert Cialdini was talking about, and he's the author of a classic book on influencing, probably the classic book on influencing. And I read this in an interview, and again, it really, really struck me. He's talking about maybe this is the killer app. Connecting in a human way builds trust. Trust builds loyalty, and loyalty trumps everything. And how do you do that? It's in the top left-hand corner of the screen. Be more human. I'd like to thank everybody who knowingly or unknowingly contributed to this presentation via moving me or connecting with me or learning with me. And I'd be very happy to take any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hain. Folks, now we're open for Q&A. If you have any questions, please either post it in the question box, chat box, or raise your hand. Once you raise your hand, we can give you an opportunity to speak to Mr. Hain as well. I see there is a question in the question box, so let me go straight to read it. Mr. Hain, on relationships, where would you put or prioritize expectations? That is, should we always expect by default that other person needs to trust me?
A couple of things I'd say about expectations. The first thing is there's a group called, I think it's called conflict resolution, and these guys deal with the Middle East issues and the Northern Ireland problem and so on. And they're on record as saying 90% of conflicts in this world are caused by the mismatch of expectations. So the first thing I'd suggest is that you make your expectations explicit in one way or another, and in the same way that I've been talking about give and gain, hopefully you'll get that back and negotiate a mutual expectation that's of value. However, you may also be referring to should I expect that I'll be trusted by everyone, and I think that would be a very dangerous assumption to make, because many people's experience of life, sometimes from an early age, sometimes in the organization they're part of, is that you can't trust people. However, if you go the other way and put a reinforced concrete or iron mask on all the time, how do you expect to make authentic or meaningful relationships? So I think what I'd say is, one, make expectations clear mutually, and two, perhaps going back to the Johari window that I was showing, be the leader in those relationships. Test it out, check it out, see what you get back, and then if you get back what I believe you will get back, only because you're doing it authentically, then it may be slightly easier. But I wouldn't suggest assuming that I should be trusted by everyone. I think I have to, like everybody else, earn that trust.
Okay, thank you very much. Another one. Considering billions of people are now digitally connected, as you mentioned, under this scenario, what would you advise on how to manage information overload? What impact it has over understanding relationships through digits and text messages?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure I've got a very easy or convincing answer. I suppose what my mind goes to is to prioritize what's important. What's important for you as a person, maybe in terms of your interests or your work. What's important for your organization. And how do you find out what's important? Well, I think you do that by developing and learning from relationships. And then perhaps you prioritize those things that seem to be important, and by implication, therefore, deprioritize things that don't fall into these categories, and use that as a guide to your behavior. Because without any question, it's true that there are many, many sources of connection out there. In my case, despite the fact that Google Plus, I think, is an excellent mechanism for connection, in some ways it's better than Twitter and Facebook, I've deprioritized using it simply because I was being swamped by ideas all the time. Some were brilliant, but most were nothing to do with what I wanted to talk about. So I think you have to be selective, and the way I would choose to be selective is based on my interest, my sense of purpose, and of negotiating that with the people around me depending on the context.
We have another one from Brother Mahmoud Sharaf. The question is, in working environment, would you recommend to assign a meeting for just socializing with staff and keep working times separate?
I think there can be significant benefits at times of off-site meetings or times to relax with people, etc. So in that sense, I would recommend that that's a part of life in some way or other, not necessarily during every working day, but certainly during every working month, let's say. However, I think that one of the things that gets in the way of all this that I've been talking about is that people see, work as work and relationships as relationships, and keep the two separate. So what I suppose I'd really advocate is working relationships that I would describe as less transactional. In other words, I'm talking to you because I need to get this done, and more transformational. I'm talking to you because I really want to understand you, what motivates you, what you don't like, so that we can work more effectively together on what we both think is the important thing to do. So I would be a strong advocate of having different conversations in the workplace, while at the same time, for certain issues or at certain times, perhaps having separate gatherings that were more purely social. I hope that answers the question.
Well, that brings us towards the end of the webinar. I would like to thank you, Mr. Hain, for your time and for giving a very, very interesting presentation. So any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
Only that in the spirit of connection, I'd be more than happy to discuss any of this further or go into bits of it in more detail, because it was, I suppose, quite wide-ranging in some ways, with anybody who wanted to further engage. And I believe all my contact details are on the website, and they're certainly on LinkedIn. So, you know, I would look forward to any conversations or email or social media exchanges along those lines.
Well, thank you
and
indeed.
Also to say thank you to everybody for taking the time.
No, thank you indeed.
To you, Ali, for hosting.
Sir, it has been a pleasure moderating your webinar, and thank you once again, and thank you all of those who attended this webinar. Folks, we have already uploaded the soft copy of the presentation that Mr. Hain illustrated in this webinar. It's available on community.mile.org under download section. So please feel free to visit the community to download and access the presentation. We're also recording this webinar, which will be uploaded in the next couple of days, so stay tuned to our community. With that note, I would like to thank you, all of you, once again.
Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.